Well, this video has been a long time coming. Due to procrastination, a busy job, and other projects, it took me a much longer time to add on all these details you see on the original building onto my 1/48th scale model of this abandoned Japanese shops building. So first off, I had a bit of paint touch-up to do. I always find this to be so relaxing, just a good paintbrush, some good paint, and a bit of patience. I also added some splotches on the building where the stucco looks like it flaked off, or maybe where someone did some patching but didn't paint over the patches with a matching color. Speaking of which, I'm still not that happy with this yellow paint color. It's toned down a bit from what I originally applied, but it's still not great. We'll see if I can do something about that later. There are also these cracks under the windows, which I etched into the drywall compound coating on the centra that makes up the shell of the building. And then filled it with gray paint. Onto the small roof over the top of the bump out. I could really only see the edge of the roof and not the top of it, so I'm guessing here that the whole roof is painted in this red paint. I'm purposefully allowing brush strokes to show. And then a matter of gluing it on. Since the roof is angled, I did fill in the ends where there was a hole with some drywall compound. Unfortunately, I didn't capture that on video. I did capture me patching the wall next to these empty spots where some of the compound fell off. I had to scrape some paint off of the little roof to get the glue to stick, so now just touching up the paint. Okay, first attempt at toning down the yellow wall color. Let's try this dark flesh paint. I think it made it worse. Let's weather the roof instead, shall we? I'm just dry brushing on some grays, browns, and greens. Again, I have no idea what the roof looks like. The satellite view is too blurry and indistinct, and Google Street View doesn't give me a glimpse of the top of the roof, obviously. It will have to do for now. So on to some details. I decided to model and then 3D print these electric meter boxes. They turned out okay, but maybe could have been a little bit bigger. I'm using this clear window film to fill in the place where glass covers the meter. But I had a clog and ended up with too much coming out of the bottle. I was able to absorb most of it with a paper towel. I then painted the outside with tan paint, as the gray I printed it in wasn't the right shade. They're fiddly little bits, so after trying to hold it in tweezers, I decided to make a paint stick with double-sided tape, and that worked better. Mounted them on some wood-colored styrene, and that part was done. Now onto this conduit pipe. A piece of styrene rod did the trick. These lights also are a detail that at first I thought I could scratch build, but then decided to just model them in Tinkercad and printed them out on my 3D resin printer. After all, I bought it for this exact reason, to print out detailed parts for my dioramas and model railroad. And with a bit of careful painting, I got them ready to stick onto the walls. Somehow the one on the right is shorter and higher up on the wall. Back to the small roof. As you can see, I tend to jump around a bit on my models. I'm adding some gray paint to denote places where the red paint came off, and I'm assuming this roof is made out of some kind of galvanized metal, or maybe that's the primer peeking through. Okay, these yellow walls are really bugging me. Let's try this light flesh, which is a bit more pinkish. I'm doing a wash by mixing just a few drops in some water. Okay, that's beginning to look a lot better. Third, or is it fourth, times the charm. There's also this crack on the bump out I want to replicate, so again with my hobby knife I carved away at the cintra and then painted the recess. Now onto this wire that goes from the conduit over to the far left of the building. I decided to use this wire and strip the insulation off of it. There's also an extra wire that I attached with some thin masking tape. A bit of fiddly work to try and bend the end just right. Some gray paint takes away that copper color. But before I fix it in place, I want to tackle this awful looking signboard. I tried to weather it as close to the photo as possible, as well as the soot or whatever the black parts are. I'm using pastel chalk that I scraped into a powder. This rusty spot for some reason gave me a ton of grief. I just couldn't get it right for some reason. Thought it was fine at this stage though. The wire can now be fixed into place with some CA and accelerator. Aha! I finally did find a Google Street View angle from further away on a hill where I could see the roofs in the distance. Looks like the little roof has some gray patches on top too, and the main roof looks like it has some kind of shingles or rolled roofing. With that newfound knowledge, I added some more gray paint to the small roof. The main roof I'll tackle later. With some very fine magnet wire I had from some wiring projects on my model railroad, I made some of the thinner wires. Again, very fiddly work that was frustrating at times, but I somehow managed. Now, what about these small holes just under the overhanging small roof? I need to add those as well with a toothpick and some dark gray paint. Here I made a huge mistake. I tried to improve the rust stain and just made it worse. After trying a few times to fix it, I gave up and I printed out a cleaned up, straightened version of the actual signboard from Google Street View. I just had to cut it out. And glued in place. And touch up a bit around it. Maybe that was cheating, but it worked. Now onto the part I was actually looking forward to, adding this vegetation that is starting to take over the doors and the central pillar. The greenery was easy, just some white glue and some ground foam. Then I tried to dye some polyfiber for the dead vines, or whatever they are. Just brushed them with some diluted acrylic paint and let them dry overnight. Nope, that didn't work. They're too matted together to pull apart. So off to the garage and I pulled up my airbrush. Much better. Sorry for the shaking camera footage. I should have used our tripod. Once that was dry the next day, I teased bits off the big clump and glued it in place. It took a bit of patience to get it in the right places and trimmed to shape. now more wiring. This looks like some kind of air conditioning piping, perhaps? I decided to drill a hole for the wire just so that I could secure it better. I just got this pin vise a month or so ago and it works really well. For this wire, I left the insulation on and I just bent it to the right shape. I'm leaving it long on the end until I've built the signboard that goes on the right side. Of course, it had to be painted gray. Now there was also a much thinner wire which I again decided to model from the magnet wire. It took quite a few tries to get this wire in the right place. And one more wire. When I looked more closely, I noticed that the middle pillar of the building has the foundation inset with these weeds or vines growing underneath. So I decided to remove the top layer of Sintra, which took a bit of time of careful scribing with my hobby knife. But it did pop loose eventually, and I painted the now exposed inner wall gray. Then added some more polyfiber to represent the dead vegetation. Now for these corner boards that look to be made of plywood that has delaminated in parts. I again decided to simply print these out from the reference photos. Top and bottom, left and right. It took a bit of work to tuck them under the roof. Okay, now to fix the remainder of the walls and banish that awful yellow color. Again, I used a light flesh wash. Much better. And yes, this is the final color I'm going with. So almost done. There is one final detail I absolutely must have, and that's this insulator bracket type of thing that at one point must have had some electrical wires, only the remnants still remain. I could have scratch built it, but again decided to model and 3D print it. It required a few colors of paint, including the middle, which is a darker green. Unfortunately, when I went to remove it from the raft it was printed on, one end broke off. But not a problem, CA glue should fix it. Once it was glued in place, I added the wires as seen in the photo. Again, some fiddly work, but I managed to hopefully create a suitable representation. bit of touch up on the roof where paint somehow got scraped off. And there you have it. Quite the work to get all these details done. But the project is not done yet. I still have a base to build, the 2 signboards on each side to build, and some roof details to add, including 3D printed gutters and scuppers. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next video in this series. Thanks for watching.